Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, today I was online and I came across an article about Jemele Hill. She's a host on ESPN. She made some controversial statements on Twitter and she's come under fire for making these statements. And basically, she was having an exchange where she was talking about Kid Rock. And just to let you all know, I plan to do a video about Kid Rock. I'm probably going to do it on my way to work. So look out for that. But she was talking about Kid Rock on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, talking about the whole controversy around some statements that he made and him using the Confederate flag and all that kind of stuff. And then she proceeded to talk about Donald Trump. She went on to talk about how Donald Trump is a white supremacist. She said that Donald Trump is the most ignorant, offensive president in her lifetime. She talked about how he surrounds himself with white supremacists and how he empowered white supremacists. And in response to that statement, ESPN put out a statement basically saying that she did not represent ESPN when she made those statements. And then they also went on to say that she understands that her statements were inappropriate, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to take out time right now to defend this sister. And I think that it's important to defend our own when our people have the courage to speak out on social justice issues. It is important that we defend them, that we insulate them, and we protect them. Because otherwise, they can end up losing their jobs, losing their livelihood. And then it makes it less likely that people of prominence will speak on issues if they don't have a community to defend them. So, for that reason, I think that we need to defend people like this sister, people like Colin Kaepernick, that put their careers and everything on the line to speak out on issues that are of importance to the black community. So that's the first thing that I have to say. And before I get into the substance of what she said, I'll just say this. We need to have our own, man. I mean, too often we're working for these people who don't have our interests at heart. We're working for white corporations. And when you work for white corporations, they can censor you, they can censor your ability to speak out on issues that matter to the people. So, for instance, you're working for a white sports network. They're not going to be okay with you saying what you want to say when it comes to issues of race. You're going to have to censor yourself and all that kind of stuff and basically tap dance. You're censoring yourself. And we need to be in a position where we have our own networks so that we can speak from our own voice and our own perspective without being censored and corrected by a boss or a supervisor or your employer and all that kind of stuff. When you're your own employer, you can speak out on issues that matter to your community. So those are some things that I just had to get out the way before I started this. So the sister said that Donald Trump is a white supremacist. And I understand what she's saying. I mean, her point is on point, it's on track. Often people have this idea of a white supremacist being a Nazi or someone that wears a Klan outfit, someone who openly makes racist statements. That's not the only definition of a white supremacist. When you look at Donald Trump and his policies and his history, you can make a sound argument that this man, in fact, is a white supremacist. This is a man who was sued twice for housing discrimination, meaning that he did not want African Americans to rent his property. The Justice Department sued him twice. And the Justice Department, if anybody knows what they do, I mean, they conduct a thorough investigation before they proceed with any kind of lawsuit. They conduct a thorough investigation. And he was sued twice by the Justice Department. This is a man who took out a full-page ad in a prominent newspaper calling for the death penalty to be reinstated in New York so that some African American people who were wrongly accused of the Central Park rape could be executed. This man has not apologized for doing so. This man stands behind that position. This is a man who condoned racial profiling, openly condoned it during the campaign. This is a man who openly endorsed New York style stop and frisk, a program that was declared unconstitutional. But this is a program that this man supports. This is a man who encouraged police brutality against suspects. He gave a speech before an audience of police officers and joked about brutalizing suspects at a time when you have all these incidents of police brutality in this country, where you have all these countless black men and women being killed by these police. This man basically encouraged police to commit violence against suspects. This is a man who encouraged violence against people who were protesting at his rallies, his campaign rallies. And many of these people who were protesting were African Americans. And many of his racist supporters attacked African Americans. And this man condoned it. This man encouraged it. This is a man who has decided to use the Justice Department in order to perpetuate injustice. Injustice. He wants to use the Justice Department to fight against affirmative action, a program that helped open the doors of opportunity to many African Americans, including myself, to get a higher education. Closing doors of opportunity. That's what this man is about. This is a man who called Mexicans rapists and criminals. So there is plenty of reason for someone to say that this man is a white supremacist. And also, in addition to that, when that situation happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, where you had these white supremacists marching around with torches like Nazis, marching around with torches like KKK members. In fact, some of them were outright Nazis and KKK members. You had them marching around with torches the day before, then the day after. They committed acts of violence, beating people, running over people in a car, injuring dozens of people. Instead of roundly and pointedly condemning those white supremacists, this man made excuses for them. He made rationalizations for what they did. He, in fact, tried to make them morally equivalent with the people who were protesting against them. That's what your president did. This man talked about how there was blame on all sides. He talked about how there were some fine people participating in that white supremacist protest. So there's a solid argument to be made that this man is, in fact, a white supremacist. And it was no coincidence that after this man made those statements about Charlottesville, it's no coincidence that after he made those statements, that you had white supremacists praising his statements. White supremacists like David Duke praising his statements. Because these white supremacists are his base. And again, there are sound arguments to be made that this man is, in fact, a white supremacist. He supports a white supremacist agenda. And it is no coincidence that the KKK endorsed him, that David Duke endorsed him, that the so-called alt-right movement endorsed him. They endorsed him because he speaks their language, because he shares their values, because he is, in fact, one of them. So this sister, Jemele Hill, made a great point when she said that he's a white supremacist. But instead of condemning all that, instead of condemning all these things that I pointed out about Donald Trump, they want to condemn this sister for speaking the truth about this ignorant, stupid, clown, buffoon, racist-ass president that we have in the White House right now. And that brings me to my second point. The sister said that Donald Trump is the most ignorant, offensive president in her lifetime. She's, again, right and exact about that. This is a man who, during the campaign, got exposed for talking about sexually assaulting women, talking about and joking about grabbing a woman by her vagina. This is a man who's made all kinds of disparaging comments about women, about the disabled, about Muslims, about African Americans, referring to African Americans as the blacks. This is a man who has insulted people on a regular basis. He goes on Twitter insulting people who criticize his policies. calling, questioning their intelligence, hurling all kinds of childish and juvenile insults at them. And this is the man who's supposed to be the president of the United States, somebody who's supposed to be the leader of the so-called free world doing this stuff. So this sister is right and exact. He is one of the most ignorant presidents we ever had. One of the most offensive presidents we've ever had. So this sister said nothing wrong. She said nothing inappropriate. She simply stated facts. She also said that he surrounds himself with white supremacists. That's an actual fact because he appointed one to be his chief political advisor, Stephen Bannon, a man who bragged about turning Breitbart into the voice for the alt-right movement. And the alt-right movement is nothing but a white supremacist movement. That's just a euphemism for white supremacy, white racism, white nationalism. This is somebody that Donald Trump put in his White House to be a chief political advisor. It's no coincidence, again, that these white supremacists support him. It's no coincidence that they were happy when he was elected. And I've said it many times before, but when he was elected, the alt-right had a convention in D.C., and they celebrated his election. They were happy. They were cheerful. And they celebrated by doing the Nazi salute. So this sister is right and exact. The sister, Jemele Hill, is right and exact when she says all these things about Trump, about the fact that he's a white supremacist, that he's the most ignorant and offensive president in her lifetime, that he surrounds himself with white supremacists. And she also said that he empowered white supremacists. He empowered them by encouraging them, by suggesting that there was blame on both sides and all that kind of stuff, by making those who were protesting the hate mongers equal with those who actually hate people, equal with those who actually have a long history of terrorizing people. So by doing so, this man basically empowered those groups. So those are my thoughts on this issue. And another white supremacist that he surrounded himself with is Jeff Sessions, a man who has a horrible history when it comes to civil rights and the issues affecting African Americans. Again, another point that I need to make is that how he set up a sham so-called voter fraud commission, which is doing nothing but being designed to suppress the votes of African Americans and other so-called minorities in this country. If that's not a white supremacist, I don't know what is. So tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.